Okay, so this video is just gonna kind of explore contemplative science, what that means, and also its implications. And I bring this up because I just got this book, Contemplative Science by B. Alan Wallace. He's a very interesting thinker about meditation and inner science and how consciousness and Eastern philosophy could be applied to understanding um, both overall human well-being, happiness, and also understanding the workings of consciousness itself. Now, it's not that we can, get it all right now, but we can eventually sort of begin to grasp what it actually is, and get a good, I guess you could say, start going down a good path to understanding it. So, the hard problem of consciousness is that we don't know what it is. We don't know how it works. We don't know how mental events arise. But um, we have direct observation of consciousness. It's not. This is the irony here. We don't know what it is. We're trying to perceive it as if we don't. From a top-down perspective, we're trying to go look at it from afar, analyze it, break it down, try to understand it. But yet we're doing it right now. I mean, it's sort of like, oh, I'm being happy. Let me analyze happiness from the outside. I mean, is it possible? That's a question too. Then our experience, the direct experience of conscious of being, is going to get in the way of understanding it. But that is only a problem if we think that direct experience of it is a problem. But it's not. I mean, it's a paradox. It's very strange. We have it right here. I mean, as Alan Wallace says in the book, a simple fact that is hardly acknowledged by either cognitive scientists or philosophers of mind, is that mental events can be observed directly. Of course, there are problems here, and he says, William James, introspection is difficult and fallible, which is true. I mean, some things we experience can be explained from the outside, you know, either delusions or, if somebody injects you with some kind of chemical and you get extremely happy, they can explain that from a neurological point of view. Um, so it's not it's not entirely infallible. I mean, there are a lot of issues, but we still have direct access to it. So, is there any way that we're not appreciating this sort of direct access? And is there any way that we can appreciate it better by utilizing it better, making it a tool for an inner science, a contemplative science? So that's I guess that summarizes the definition. Um, so, let's see. So yeah, according to the East, in Buddhism and Taoism and other Eastern contemplative practices, meditation, or as they call it in Buddhism, samadhi, I think that's how you pronounce it, is a means to do this. This is the inner science. This is making consciousness a tool to understand itself, and it's focused attention, and it's observing the mind and trying to understand what it is. Who am I? Who are you? What is this thing that I call I-ness? And it's going into that, and some interesting things are found. I mean, he goes into Buddhist contemplatives claim that with the achievement of a highly advanced degree of samadhi, known as samatha, or meditative quiescence, the quieting of the mind, um, one gains experiential access to the relative ground state of consciousness known as the Great Perfection, or the Dzogchen school of Tibetan Buddhism, known as the substrate consciousness. I don't even try to pronounce that in its original language. But basically, what it's saying is through inner science, through this contemplative science, through quieting the mind, we can begin to have greater and more objective, I guess you could say, access to this pure consciousness, to understanding the grounding of what consciousness is from. And very interestingly, it's almost as if we're clearing the mind of all bias, except for the fact that we have a mind with certain biases built in, such as reality is a construct of the brain. We help kind of mold reality through that aside. We sort of by quieting the mind, we sort of kind of clean the the inner telescope or the inner microscope, um, and we get a clearer picture of who we are. So this substrate consciousness, which is interesting, is the individual stream of consciousness from which the psyche and all physical senses emerge. According to their findings, the psyche is conditioned by the body and its physical interaction with the environment, but it emerges from the substrate consciousness. So it's basically saying there is this pure consciousness um, that emerges from another greater, another purer consciousness, I guess you could say. Yeah, our waking experience of reality, this consciousness, is from a purer form of consciousness, if that makes sense. And it's this waking experience is sort of molded by the brain and the environment, because the brain is part of the environment. Um, so you have this purity of consciousness coming into the mind, and then being molded by the mind, almost as if like you have. I think I mentioned this in another video about emanationism. You have this pure light, this pure awareness. This pure light that becomes fragmented, and these different fragments still hold a part of that light, but they're just reflecting it differently through the different lenses of breaking down into the I guess you could say the fragmentation of reality, the dualities. Um, and interestingly, he says this is consistent with Pythagoras, Socrates, Origen, Augustine, and William James, and is compatible with everything that is currently known about mind-brain interactions. Now let's see. But this is also where all these contemplative views fundamentally diverge from the beliefs of most contemporary cognitive scientists. And this is true. A lot of what the mystics and the sages originally said, nearly universally, very interestingly, that across the world they're saying the same sort of thing. Um, from in ancient perspectives, but in modern day perspectives, we're saying something different. But my bet is that this may not necessarily be accurate. The modern cognitive perspective, a necessary step, but fallacious in its understanding, as it makes sense. I mean, science goes through fallacious periods, which makes sense relatively, but then there's some kind of paradigm shift that kind of revolutionizes the school of thought. But anyway, getting back. So what Buddhism brings to this confrontation of worldviews is a practical way to put the hypothesis to the test of first-person experience, through the refinement of attention and the settling of the mind in ways that are unknown to modern science. Good enough. I mean, if you purify the mind, if you settle the mind down, you might be able to observe things more directly and gain more insight, which in turn, if scientists listen to this, they might be able to actually enhance their own studies. Perhaps it'll take them in another direction that they didn't think of before, and then something else will be revealed, which will confirm this experience. For instance, I mean, it's likened to say, I feel happy. Let me see. Why do I feel happy? I feel happy when this is happening. Let me check that out. And then it's confirmed. Like, oh, happiness, is induced by certain things like this. So it's the same sort of, I guess you could say, direction or science or philosophy, or I guess you could say even better, a methodology. So one advantage of samatha, he says, does not require allegiance to any religious or philosophical system. It's just bare awareness, bare quieting of the mind. You don't need to do much else except for the practical practices that enable that. So it's a very pragmatic sort of philosophy, pragmatic practice. This is how to quiet the mind. Set aside any other philosophies or worldviews. This is how to quiet the mind. Be in the moment, be in the now, and breathe. Focus on your awareness. So the Tibetan contemplatives report that what remains is a state of radiant, clear consciousness that is the basis for all emergence of appearances to an individual's mind stream. All phenomena appear to sensory and mental perception are imbued with the innate luminosity of this substrate consciousness. Like the reflections of planets and stars in a pool of limpid, clear water, so do appearances of the entire phenomenal world seem within this empty, clear, ground state of the psyche. The substrate consciousness, with its vacuous and clear nature, abides as the cause of everything that is emanated. The psyche that emanates from the substrate consciousness presents forms, which are stabilized by a continuous stream of consciousness. So again, this whole theory of emanation, this pureness, this non-duality, this emptiness, this primordial awareness that gives birth to all things. Well, this is what they find when they begin to meditate and have this. So whether or not this is simply a neurological brain blank slate, so to speak, a neurological process that creates consciousness. Maybe consciousness is created by the brain as a blank slate, and then it starts refining all these different things.